First of all, I believe this is the only way of dethroning the incumbents, to build something that is really able to compete on eye level and outcompete the largest tech companies. You cannot do this on your own. DePIN is, I think, just made for the real world use case in crypto. DePIN it's super OPEX and CAPEX heavy. You need billions to build a decent or a cloud in general. AWS alone is investing somewhere between 25 and 50 billion into the infrastructure every year.
This episode is brought to you by Polygon Labs. They have one of the largest DePIN ecosystems out there, including projects like Demo, GeoDNet, and Wi-Fi Map, and they're building the next generation of open source zero-knowledge tech. Through the AG layer, they're unifying liquidity and user bases, allowing developers to build an interoperable web of unified chains. Visit polygon.technology/grants to apply for funding today.
Glad to have you here today on the podcast. I want to talk about Goodgame Studios and Goodgame Empire first off, because I was a big fan of the Goodgame Empire game. I played it a bunch on PC, just had a lot of fun with it, many years ago. And you actually co-founded the gaming studio that built that game. So talk to me about maybe the experience building that big of a gaming studio and what it taught you about cloud services demand and use cases for cloud gaming.
First of all, great to hear that you enjoyed playing Goodgame Empire. That was really a massive game, obviously a massive hit. Building a gaming studio, building a company in general. So I think from heart, I'm an entrepreneur. I always was. I always had fun building things and seeing things evolve. Also to be part of a new movement and so forth, and having some impact. So that was always super rewarding. And we started really I founded the company basically in the basement of my parents' house with my brother. Some bank debt on our own shoulders, and then from there we took it to 1,400 people around at peak times, and Goodgame Empire alone grossed more than $1 billion in total revenue. So it was super massive. Then the reverse merger to the Nasdaq obviously was a big event where we sold to a listed entity on the Nasdaq, became the largest shareholders there. Then afterwards, I was a couple more years in a board seat. That was a little bit more boring, more M&A stuff. So we bought 15, 20 other gaming studios, capital markets experience, and so forth. Was interesting as well, but over time that got a little bit more boring. And coming back to your question, how is it to run cloud services, maybe in a gaming company and so forth? So obviously running games is super hardware intensive. You really need super sophisticated networks. Just imagine there's millions and millions of players playing at the same time, all requiring low latency, distributed all around the world. And essentially people played in every single country on the planet except for North Korea. So that was pretty intense. And in the beginning it was thousands and thousands of bare metal servers all around the globe. For low latency, you needed them everywhere, like South America and some areas of Asia being particularly difficult because interconnectivity sometimes was not that great. And then later we moved to the cloud. So I remember overall we probably paid in excess of $200 million just to AWS, right?
Wow.
So it's pretty intense. That's also coupled with several hundred million in marketing spent for Google, Facebook in particular. Lots of TV commercials in 30 countries or so. So there was a lot of experience on the marketing and on the tech side. And the tech side definitely, also the exposure to large tech companies in the US were probably one of the early building blocks of founding then later Impossible Cloud.
100%. Yeah, and that's a great segue to what you're doing now. Maybe before we get into your exact approach with Impossible Cloud Network, what excites you about a DePIN model for cloud services? Why is a kind of decentralized community-owned network better than the kind of traditional market incumbents that provides these services today?
Yeah, I think it's several reasons. So first of all, I believe this is the only way of dethroning the incumbents, like to build something that is really able to compete on eye level and outcompete the largest tech companies. You cannot do this on your own. There's no single company, not a startup, also like the large telco companies, whatever, they cannot compete. And DePIN is, I think, just made for the real world use case in crypto. I mean, there are other real world use cases where crypto can bring a lot of benefit, the whole crypto industry, but DePIN it's super OPEX and CapEx heavy. You need billions to build a decent or a cloud in general. AWS alone is investing somewhere between 25 and 50 billion into the infrastructure every year. And this can only be done in a joint effort. And what I like really about the approach in general, for me, this is thinking a little bit more like the open source movement of the very early days, but you have on top, you have this incentivization layer. And what I mean with like outcompeting the largest tech companies, no matter how many smart people they have, there will be always more smart people outside. And if you are able to incentivize these people to a joint common goal, then this can be super, super successful. And maybe one thing that excites me really about DePIN as well is the need, which is inevitable for many, many use cases, of decentral networks, right? So in terms of ownership, I think it's very beneficial to not have the internet controlled by 5 companies or so. There are many downsides. So like this oligopoly, where we can talk about this in more detail. This is then more maybe a philosophical question, but I really doubt that this is a good future. But also from a physics perspective, first principle thinking, for many use cases, having a decentralized network is absolutely needed, because it does not really make sense to generate, for example, data everywhere on the edge and then transfer that data to a central hub, calculate it there and send it back, right? So you always want to have very close proximity between data generation and data computation. And this can only be done by decentral networks. And then, of course, you have other reasons, like no single point of failure, for example. Also, it's much more efficient to move everything close to where electricity, for example, is being generated. Electricity is also not being generated central, right? So if you look into Europe, for example, you have these huge hubs in Frankfurt and London and Amsterdam and so forth. Electricity is generated for good reasons everywhere. And this creates huge problems. West part of London, you have like a stop of private home buildings for the next 5 years at least, because electricity supply cannot really be done, because all the electricity is just absorbed by the data centers there, right? So there's a lot of problems that we run into with central data centers and exponential growth. And the AI trend, of course, is like just increasing the exponential growth on the demand side even more. And I think there is no way, it's inevitable that we need these decentral networks, and these can be built much, much better by a decentral community than by a central authority.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like I've seen that with CDN businesses and cloud services businesses, where it's like almost just without any crypto or decentralization in like a Web 2 sense of the business model, like you need, like you said, servers distributed around the world to reduce latency close to the kind of end user. So there's already kind of a decentralized aspect. And then the question is like, is that hardware and infrastructure owned by one company, or is it owned by many different entities? And if it's owned by many different entities, the market's less of an oligopoly, and you can lower costs and do a lot of other interesting things, but you need to be able to coordinate all those different entities and people. And I think that's where blockchains and crypto and token incentives that can be changed and adapted kind of come in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, also, if you think back, the internet itself was, for very good reason, not developed in a central way, but very decentral, right? And although that was not 100% clear, because in the beginning Microsoft was very much against that, and they were propagating a Microsoft internet highway, which is gated by Microsoft basically, because everything else would be way too unsecure. Fortunately, that never happened. But anyways, so I think that's designed for good reasons. And what you mentioned also, innovation, I think, will happen much, much faster in a decentralized world. So I think there are many, many benefits. Probably, nevertheless, even if some people might not want to hear it, I think it's not as black and white as some people might say. So of course, there are certain use cases where some kind of, at least non-distributing makes sense, right? So if you have large language models, learning, whatever, it makes sense to gather the data very nearby. So for certain use cases, it definitely makes sense to have huge central capacities, but definitely not all over the place and not only.
For sure. And then talk to us a bit about the Impossible Cloud Network approach specifically to this kind of coordination problem and what products or services you're looking to bring to market.
Right. So the approach is, of course, a super large vision. We said from the beginning, let's build a decentralized version of AWS. And that's super complex. If you think about the infrastructure, we just talked about it, it's billions worth of infrastructure. On the software side, AWS probably as of today has around, what is it, like 250 services, like from storage to some kind of compute and serverless computations and CDNs and databases and so forth, right? And also on the service side, on the software side, no company will be able to build this on their own. So the idea was always we need to define certain rules, what you mentioned, guided by blockchain protocol, which is incentivizing and orchestrating, in a way, network participants, right? So that they can add on all sides, either providing hardware, providing software on top, and so forth. So that was the ultimate goal. Obviously, you need to slice that into pieces. It's just too much to build everything at the same time. And so we started from the beginning with the focus on the demand side. We said, okay, look, Web3, there are a lot of projects. Like when we started, nobody called them DePIN projects, but effectively they have been DePIN projects. So a lot of these projects have been really succeeding in providing tremendous amounts of infrastructure, but on the demand side, really doing a poor job, right? So very difficult to use these products. Sometimes you needed crypto. The complexity was huge. The performance was pretty bad. The compliance was not there. And we said, if we really want to conquer make a project that is competing against AWS, you really need to be demonstrating that you are able to build enterprise-grade products, onboard Web 2 customers, because this is the by far the largest market, the cloud market. It's $1 trillion market, and let them run on Web 3 hardware, right? So on a hardware that is run by third-party people like storage providers and so forth. And so we said, okay, let's start with one use case. We decided for several reasons to go for object storage, which I think makes sense. A different story, but anyways. And by now, it took longer than anticipated. By now, we have around 1,000 enterprise customers, and we talk about just real Web 2 enterprise customers. None of them is having any wallets or crypto. They store data on third-party hardware. All right, so that's happening as of today. There's roughly like 1 billion files being uploaded every other day, and so it's already a massive use case that is a real-world use case, and that's growing quite nicely. Of course, it's just the first service, but that's very nice because we in the beginning had some question marks. Will we be able to build the bridge, basically, and make enterprise customers excited about storing on Web3 technology? Because there is still hesitation, I think, on both ends, Web 2, Web 3, and understanding and embracing the new technology. That was one of the big question marks, finding product market fit here, but that worked. And one last thing now, so what's happening right now, we are transferring, as we speak, all the Web3 related assets over to a Swiss foundation. The protocol, the relationship to the hardware providers, there will be nodes, validation nodes, nodes say, we can talk about this maybe later as well. That's all governed by a Swiss foundation. And the goal for the foundation is just to make this a super successful project, build this decentralized AWS, but by the rules, embrace a lot of other network participants on all angles, right? So that's the current status, kind of.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you had your testnet in October, which I think is wrapped up or in its final stages. So talk to us about how that went in terms of community participation and what you were looking to get people to test out.
Right. So Testnet, of course, was also the first building block of attracting people who want to participate in the network. And of course, at the same time, starting to battle test if the protocol is working in the right and anticipated way. So by now, we exceeded around 100,000 testnet users. Overall, this also fueled, of course, the community in general. So on X and Discord and Telegram, I think we got another 250,000 people, followers, and so forth. And this is super helpful because essentially, what I mentioned in the beginning, we want to build this together. There's no way of doing this alone. And people can, in several ways, participate in the future, right? Either on the development side, the foundation will open source a lot of this stuff, so there will be development needed on several angles. Then at the same time, what is needed as well, of course, is people who run nodes, these validation nodes. This is part of the effort of the node sale, which is just being started. And then, of course, token holders, right? This is also super important. We will list the token in Q1 next year. And then from there on, people can also use tokens and provide collateral to the network. And this is also helping to build the network faster, right? So there are many ways of participating. And this is all one of the next steps, which is absolutely needed in order to make this really successful and come to a eye level comparison to AWS then.
For sure. So yeah, lots of ways to get involved. On the supply side of your network in terms of compute and providing cloud services, I'm assuming you're taking a very B2B approach, given that you're trying to serve enterprise level customers on the demand side, right? Like you don't want some random guy with, one GPU in his basement. Like he doesn't really have a place in the network today, but you're looking for more like data centers and just huge kind of like server farms to onboard onto the supply side, right?
Yeah, so there are several phases how we build the network. The very first phase obviously is kind of a very high growth and bootstrap phase where we onboard a lot of hardware capacity. It's exactly what you mentioned. So in the beginning, it's super essential to have everything run out of compliant data centers. So we talk about like ISO 27K or SOC 2 compliance certificates, HIPAA compliances, and so forth, depending on the industry. A lot of the enterprises, almost all enterprises, require that, right? So even if you and me and, 1,000 others would combine their laptops together, and even if that would be run by the most sophisticated cryptographic proof, enterprise customers would not be allowed and able to tap into these resources because they are not running in compliant data centers, right? So it's still an ongoing issue that might be different a couple of years from now. So also here, we take a very evolutionary approach. We do what is working now, and the goal obviously is to move with the technological advancements, right? So I'm very certain the crypto industry has come a long way. I think it's still in its infancy of mass adoption. But on the other hand, I think we are at an inflection point where also, if you talk about DePIN, you see more and more projects that start to care about the demand side and building real world products and so forth. And by now, I think the industry is getting ready, right? It's getting fast enough, it's getting reliable enough, scalable enough to provide enough on the Web3 technology side to make this happen. And over time, well, it might be that we, if the network is robust enough, that we might add additional capacity also running out of non-data centers. But that's a little bit more further out. Maybe it also comes with additional services that don't require this compliance level.
100%. Yeah, you can always have, different product offerings or different tiers of compliance, security, that kind of thing. But it makes sense to start enterprise grade, if you're on the supply side, if you're trying to serve those customers on the demand side. So that makes sense. I saw online you guys had $15 million of ARR, and you just talked about, your storage product, like data storage product, which is kind of the first product you've brought to market. So are you already serving demand, and is that demand and that revenue coming from the data storage product, or what is your demand pipeline look like today?
Yeah, so the 50 million ARR is like the near-term pipeline. At the moment, it's a little bit less, but it's really growing quite rapidly. So the product came to life like out of MVP POC phase early this year, Q1 this year. And then we had end of Q2, roughly 200 enterprise customers, and end of Q3, we surpassed 1,000. That's growing quite nicely. And these enterprise customers are, basically how this works is there's like a sales approach, obviously. So you have like a sales team. It's a regular Web 2-ish approach, I would say, in a way, with a big channel approach, where we don't sell directly, but through distributors, resellers, and so forth. But the interesting part is that all these participants get educated that essentially we are not running the hardware ourselves. The hardware is run by former storage providers from other networks, DePIN providers from other networks. But interestingly, there are a lot of these providers out there that we work with that run hardware as well for many other DePIN projects. What they really like about it is that there is an actual use case and actual Web 2 customers using it, right? And also the fun part is that we built this in a composable way where we can plug into the protocol other services, with some effort, but quite easily. So there are, for example, ideas of a slow archival, low-cost tier, maybe on IPFS. Protocol Labs is one of our investors. So that's one of the ideas, also interesting. And other services also for potential Web3 customers. We said always like the Web2 customers probably have the highest requirements on demand side. If we can serve them, we can serve anybody.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes sense. And then you said Q1 of 2025 would be your token launch. I believe it's going to be on Base. So talk to me about the decision on that chain and what you liked about, the tech, the ecosystem, kind of anything else.
Yeah, so there was quite some discussion. We started with the idea, Ethereum EVM compatible. The token is also going to be an ERC20 token, and then settlement layer 2 base, what you mentioned. There was quite some discussion if we should do this approach or go with Solana. Obviously, I think Solana did a tremendous job over the last 12 months. I think like 12 months ago, when we kind of laid the groundwork for the decision, Solana was not a real option, but like over time, it became more and more a competitor in a way. Nevertheless, we decided in the end to keep everything on Ethereum. For me, what's super important is I think both ecosystems would work for us, for the demand that we have, for the requirements that we have. And for me, it was important to have the safest bet. What is going to be there in 5 to 10 years, right? Where is the largest developer community, right? And these things are, I would still say, in favor of Ethereum. Definitely, there are some people on the Solana side who will say the opposite. So I talked to people from both camps. But predicting the future is always hard. Nevertheless, I mean, of course, it would be painful, but changing or building bridges would be possible, definitely. But for the moment, we decided to go that way.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, I think those are the two main choices for chains these days in terms of DePINs, or at least this seems like that's what the market in terms of DePINs is choosing.
Maybe one thing to add, of course, I think Solana is doing a tremendous job in trying to become the number one layer 1 chain for DePIN projects. And obviously, there's always a discussion about synergies between DePIN projects, which, by the way, I think is super important. In general, Web3 industry, but also especially in the DePIN side, there you see a lot of islands, and I think it needs to be worked out how these islands can be bridged in a way that you have one usable product for, or like an as easy to use a product for end customers, no matter who is the end customer, if it's like a B2C, B2B, or Web 2 or Web 3. But the usage of different islands is sometimes too difficult. And this is one of the main approaches that we go for also early next year. So we have some partnerships in the DePIN space, also trying to bridge the gap there and cooperating with other DePIN projects that offer also super compelling services that our customers are requesting.
For sure. I've seen a lot more of that this cycle, which I've been pleased to see, is kind of DePIN composability or DePIN partnerships. And I love when it's like at the tech or services level as well. Like there's a lot of like, let's partner and download each other's app type partnerships in the DePIN space, but it's really cool when like one service is using another or something else on like a deeper technical level. So excited to see that from you guys. Last quick question I have is around the token. And if it's too early or you guys haven't, finalized the tokenomics, no worries at all. But I'm just curious what you see as the utility for the token, like how it will be used on the supply side, on the demand side, and then also maybe how you plan to accrue revenue from demand to the token, if you do.
Right. So I would say actually tokenomics are quite sophisticated. We have a great team, also super experienced on other Web3 projects that built the tokenomics there. Also some gaming experience that went into that, because I think there is a lot of relationship between building free-to-play game economies and tokenomics. Yeah, so one thing what is super important, I think, down the line to make this really sustainable for the long term is this demand side, which is creating in the end buy pressure. So the way how it works is regular Web 2 businesses are paying whatever money in fiat for the services. And then there is, at the moment, there's one service provider. It's one company, basically, one German company that is offering this object storage service. In the future, there will be hundreds, hopefully, of service providers offering different services. And the service providers then take the fiat money and buy tokens on an exchange. And with these tokens, they use these tokens in the protocol. Again, the protocol governed by the Swiss Foundation, use these tokens in the protocol to allocate hardware resources. And then obviously on the supply side, hardware providers are rewarded in tokens. And also they have to provide collateral to ensure the reliability of the network, right? So, and collateral, if the uptime is bad or if there's tampered around with the hardware or whatever, then potentially collateral can be slashed. And there are a lot of other details. One important thing to mention as well, or maybe two things to mention as well, every token holder can also provide collateral, so like delegate collateral for a yield to the hardware providers. And that essentially makes the hardware network grow faster, because hardware providers have a certain amount of investment maybe that they can make. And either they do it like 50% in hardware, 50% in collateral, or if the collateral is delegated from other people, then they can invest more into the hardware. All right. So that's basically how a lot of people, by just buying tokens and delegating them as collateral, they can help build the network as well, right? So that's the least amount of work that you need to do in order to participate in the network. And the last part is running nodes. So the node sale, as I mentioned, public node sale is going to start December 5th. Everybody can buy NFT licenses. And with these NFT licenses, you are allowed to run a node, participate in the network. And then you get rewarded with tokens, ICNT tokens as well. You can also use these licenses, by the way, to delegate collateral again, which is not much work. If you're not sophisticated enough to set up a node, it's not a problem. You can just use these NFT licenses to delegate collateral. There are a lot of more details to it. We have, I think it's published by now, you can find it on the website, some more information on the tokenomics. And I think it's an interesting setup there.
Super cool. Well, great to hear that you've got the tokenomics that fleshed out. I know the 1KX guys are really sharp on DePIN tokenomics as well. So good to have them in your camp. But Kai, this has been great. Thank you very much for coming on. Where would you like to point our listeners to on the internet to learn more or to get involved with what you guys are building?
So you can start with the website icn.global. You can also go on Twitter, Discord, or Telegram. Look for ICN, Impossible Cloud Network. You will find us, ICN Protocol on Twitter. But if you start off on the website, there's the light paper, there's a lot of documentation, also the links to the social media. Just keep yourself updated, and would love to get more people enthusiastic about the project and help building it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Connor.